Hi, I'm Bill Holcomb, and thanks for joining me for this week's watercolor landscapes tutorial, where we will be painting the famous cliffs of Moher in Ireland. Here's a list of the materials used in this video. I start with a very faint wash of Windsor yellow at the top, coming part way down, and then a combination of the Windsor yellow and the alizarin crimson, both very weak. Using the mop brush, about size 20 will do. Come down to the top of the cliffs and the horizon at the sea level. Then still using the mop brush, lay in some clear Windsor blue, letting that fuse in. So lots of wet in wet going to take place for the sky. And then just using the tip of the mop brush to lay in some further stripes of the blue. Then go to your half-size flat brush and use a mixture of Windsor blue and alizarin crimson for darker cloud shapes. So whichever shapes you wish, just bear in mind that the clouds at the top are thicker. Those towards the horizon get much thinner. And the flat brush is very useful for this because you maintain much more control. So just shape that up as much as possible, and you'll see, as always, that the paints at first look quite dark, but once we've dried them off with a hairdryer, they lighten quite significantly. So just carry on with that, shape up accordingly as you wish. And it doesn't matter that they're running down a little bit, giving a stormy effect. And then we've dried off with a hairdryer. Then we've gone to the number 10 size rounded brush with a nice point to it, laying down some Windsor yellow, weak wash again. And then that mixture of Windsor yellow and alizarin crimson, dropping in here and there with little gaps in between. Then still the number 10 brush for some Windsor blue, wet in wet, taking place again for the ocean as we did with the sky. I started at the bottom and worked my way up because I wanted the pigment to get thinner the further away we got on the ocean towards the horizon. Same technique again with a darker version, so Windsor blue and the alizarin crimson again. Dropping that in to show movement on the ocean, waves coming in strands like that. And then where we have left some white on purpose towards the bottom of the cliffs for some foamy water, waves crashing and so forth, we then darken the ocean running up to those wave areas. That gives a nice contrast, shows the white of the paper up even more, and that's the English style of transparent watercolor painting, where we use the whites of the paper for our whites instead of using an opaque color such as a Chinese white. We do that because it's more natural, has a better effect, final effect, because the opaque paints jump out at you, the white would jump out and it wouldn't look natural. So at the top of the cliff, I've laid down some Windsor yellow and a little bit of the permanent sap green and let those fuse together. And then with the number 10 brush, some light red. You could have light red with a little bit of yellow ochre. So you've got a nice variation in the rock face. Lots of different colours going on, colours that would be natural. Then at the very bottom of the cliffs, as we come down to those crashing waves and foaming water areas, we darken up the bottom of the cliffs, which is the case in reality, but thankfully that enables us to achieve a very strong contrast. Now, these rock formations have been laid down, of course, over many years and then eroded with the weather effects and pushed up here and there and so forth. And therefore, we wish to show little striations, little layers within the rocks. And we've got some horizontal lines and some vertical lines going on. Once again, wet in wet taking place. Use something like your number 4 brush. Follow some of those lines, create others. And towards the right side of this first cliff section, we're purposefully leaving that light. So there's a nice contrast each time between one cliff edge and the next cliff. So lots of fusing in going on here. And later on, when that has dried, we then go to lines to emphasize those lines in the rock formations. Use your number 4 brush, as I'm demonstrating now. And we'll also be using the side brush scraping technique to show texture in the rock face, as I'm doing now. And remember again to mix your colours up. The painting I've demonstrated here in this tutorial has, of course, certain colours, but you may wish to vary it. But I've tried to keep it as close as possible to reality. But at certain times of day, of course, any of these rock faces would vary in coloration according to light, whether that's direct light from sunshine or a fused light from a misty day or reflected light of the ocean, etc. So that could vary. You'll see that from various photographs of the cliffs taken at different times of day and in different weather conditions. And do remember to stay through to the end, because I do give a tip about painting some wildflowers on this nearby cliff edge that is covered in grass. So it's the same sort of process here going on through each of these cliff formations, jutting out into the ocean, and therefore I won't show every single one being painted. We'll jump forward here and there. At the bottom of the cliff there is thankfully some rocks down there which enable us to show a nice contrast at the bottom there. There's also a little cave which I'm painting in now, very dark, in that third cliff formation, and that adds a little bit of interest. And further on down the next cliff, you'll see at the bottom some rocks coming out, more prominent rocks, where they haven't entirely succumbed to the erosion. And there's a little structure there at the top that is actually in reality in this location, and we've just indicated that in the very far distance on the last of the cliff formations. Now I'm going to purposefully demonstrate lifting. I'm using clear water on my flat brush, and I'm gently putting that where the ocean meets the sky so that I can lift. And that is one of the beauties of this type of paper, the Arches 300-pound rough. It is very robust and enables us to do such things without damaging the surface of the paper. Obviously, when I lay the water down, I'm lightly touching the paper, I'm not digging into it. And that tissue is as soft as possible. Then on the nearby grassy cliff area, lay down some strong yellow, add, whilst it's wet, some of the permanent sap green, let that all fuse in, gets lighter at the edge and darker in the foreground. You can use a hairdryer to dry that off, and once dry you can use the side of the brush technique for adding grass on the bank. So your mixture of your blue and your permanent sap green and yellow. So you just dab and lift and scrape and so forth with that brush. This is a number 10, which is fine for doing this. You can go to a smaller brush if you wish, but at first I'm using a 10. And at the edge there are some grasses that are more defined coming out from the edge. I'm indicating those. Soon we'll be using this excellent technique for wildflowers. We've got a pastry brush. So this is a tip I can give you for adding wildflowers to a painting. You just need a little bit of the pigment and not too much water. Here and there I've got too much water, so dab out quickly with a tissue and then continue to get the desired effect. And of course I varied the colours that are available to me to show the different wildflowers. And please remember to like and subscribe. So I think this pastry brush technique is very useful for getting convincing wildflowers. And here is the finished painting. I hope you've enjoyed that. I know you can achieve this one. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.